one of the things that caught my eye, that, there's so much going on right now, Hillary's health and whether or not she's being poisoned by the Russians and Trump is a racist idiot and blah, blah, blah. Something that came up that I really thought was important to touch on, I saw a little blip about it earlier today, was the FBI allegedly is getting ready to release a report indicating that there has been a significant increase in the murder rates for 2015. So basically when you control 2015 compared to 2014. So there's a Guardian piece, and one of the studies the study that was done for the DOJ by a professor out of St. Louis. This study looks at 3 reasons for looking at why murders may have increased between 2004 and 2005, like for 2005 as compared to 2015. I'm using the wrong years. 2015 and 2014. I said 2005 like 3 times. See, come on now. I need y'all to correct me. Come on, help me out, y'all. But anyway, so part of the 3 reasons that they looked at in terms of trying to explain why the murder rate increased, like, supposedly significantly. I mean, that's debatable because people can do whatever they want to do with statistics. They don't control for certain things, whatever. But anyway, so they looked at increase in urban drug territory, primarily the increase in heroin use, abuse, and overdoses, as well as in drug-related crimes around heroin. Some of the research was showing that heroin use and drug crimes have grown exponentially over that of cocaine. And then the other thing they looked at was the increase in prisoners being released back into the community, people not being kept in jail as long, people being re-released, in greater numbers than before. And then the third thing was the so-called Ferguson effect. So I'm really disappointed with this report that was presented to the DOJ, presumably commissioned by the DOJ, because to look at, there was a mere blip about, social economic status, about poverty, about, issues involving unemployment. When you look at, one of the arguments made is that it's not that it's increasing everywhere across the nation exponentially, but it's only concentrating like 10 of the largest, 10 certain urban centers, so it's pretty much the usual suspects, right? Chicago, LA, Baltimore, well, maybe not LA, it was Chicago, Baltimore, Detroit, Cleveland, there's that list. Milwaukee might have been on there. I can't remember all 10 off the top of my head, but one of the things that stuck out to me though, was Chicago. I used to live in Chicago, know a little bit about some of this stuff. I'm not going to act like I'm a Chicago expert, but with Chicago, what stuck out to me was the fact that there have already been issues with the way the police department had reported numbers for 2014. 2014 numbers, there was a series of articles done by, I think it was a Chicago magazine, and there was also some other stuff done by Chicago Reader. There's some really great investigative journalism that's come out of Chicago in the past couple of years, particularly when it involves the police and other stuff going on with Rahm's administration as well. So part of that looked at the way they were reporting the numbers. And there has been the same, accusation like with New York and other cities too, that they're reporting their numbers in a certain way to make it look like they've had this sharp decline when really they're just changing how they report numbers. So this was not really accounted for in this report that's being relied upon, ahead of this alleged FBI increase to say that there's this spike in crime. And guess when this report is allegedly due to come out? Again, I say allegedly. This is an article that I was reading today, and they were saying the FBI is supposed to be releasing this report on the day of the first debate. So the concern is that if there is, in fact, some report that is being released, considering the climate that we have right now, considering the candidates that we have right now, right? Because on the one hand, we supposedly have this great racial justice champion, Hillary Clinton, rah, she's going to fight for us. She's caring about our issues, whatever. And then we have this raging KKK Nazi racist Donald Trump. So scared for my life. Oh my God, there's going to be a cross burning in my front yard. Terrified. Can't you see I'm shaking? Like, really? Anyway, so like if we have this conversation, right, it seems like we're almost in the 90s again. With this alleged, and that's the one thing they talked about in this. It's like, so, there was this, there hasn't been this huge increase in crime since, well, not in just crime, in murder, right? since that early 90 period when, Bill had approved that he was so tough on crime. So do we see that same scenario happening again after all this yah about criminal justice reform? Are we going to see this happen a redux? Is this going to be Clinton part 2? I'm tough on crime too, to try and pull some of those moderate Republicans, as we've seen that she's already been doing? Or do we see Donald Trump, who's already put out, not fraudulent, but like fallacious numbers and statistics, and really fanning the flame of the rabid form of racism that some of his supporters, embrace? Do we then have this type of report fanning the flames and only furthering not just that stuff, but decision making that is being made at the state and local level? Because again, we're talking about issues with prisons, we're talking about, criminal justice reform. A lot of the things that affect, our individual daily lives are happening at the state and local level. These are decisions happening in cities and practices like stop and frisk. This stuff is happening not at some high federal decision making level, but in these very more local, colloquial settings. So that was something I thought was really interesting to talk about. But it really bothered me that this report commissioned by the government included this nonsense about the Ferguson effect. The Ferguson effect has already been debunked several times over. This is a recent report that just came out in June. They didn't really. There was no real discussion about, like I said, unemployment, any of the underlying factors that may contribute to crime, the different types of crime that like we talk about murder, like murder includes things like self-defense. Like it didn't parse it out at all. And it didn't account for the fact that in some of these cities, there has been a misreporting or underreporting of statistics in prior years. So what can seem like a huge increase may or may not even actually be that huge. What is leading? Is there really some new thing going on? Who knows? I mean, I also wonder, and don't laugh at me because people laughed at Bernie when he said this. I also wonder when we talk about, global warming, and we keep talking about how it's getting hotter, right? And when you look at, again, I'll talk about Chicago. When you look at Chicago and you look at those months, and as soon as there's a really nice hot day, there's a whole mess of shootings and other stuff going on. So is there a connection? Is there a connection between increase in temperature, and particularly when we're talking about our urban centers, concrete jungles? Is there a connection between that and gun violence? I mean, I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. But if it applies that, when we look at, rise in terrorism and other things, if global warming is leading to increased violence and other stuff in other places, why would that also not hold true here?